we need people that are in the middle, you know? And
This is a call to order of a special meeting of the Personnel, Pension, and Insurance Committee of the Metropolitan District, Wednesday, September 20th, 2023. Mr. Secretary, do we have a quorum?
Yes, we do.
Are there any public comments relative to agenda items? Once again, are there any public comments relative to agenda items? There being none, we'll move to item 3, approval of meeting minutes of August 22nd, 2023.
So moved. Second?
Are there any comments, amendments, what have you? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? We move to item 4, consideration of potential action with regard to approval of insurance coverage and limits. I believe that's you, Bob?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have Ronnie Roush here from Gallagher that's going to go over our 23-24 insurance renewal that is scheduled for October 1st. All of the current quotes, I've been in conversation with John Myrtle. The way that the agenda item is written, it asks for a vote to approve the rates as presented. However, I've asked for an amendment. If Julie's passing around a one-pager that you'll see, at the very bottom of the page, it'll show our current quotes at $2,190,692. However, part of that quote is our pollution coverage. You didn't see pollution coverage last year because we had a 3-year policy, but it expired this year and will be scheduled to renew October 1st. Zurich, the provider of that insurance coverage, is no longer offering that coverage. So we have to go out into the market and solicit new coverage, and we don't have a rate yet. So what you'll see for the Zurich coverage is an estimate of about a 10% increase. That 10% increase is included in the $2,190,000. I visited with Ronnie, and what we've communicated to John is that we would like to change the agenda item to say an approval of up to $2.2 million. It gives us another 10 grand. Should the Zurich policy come in greater than the 10% we're estimating. We're also not rushing this. Zurich has agreed to extend the policy at this current rate through November 1st. And so your approval tonight will allow us to go out and secure the best and coverage at the lowest price. And then I'll report back to you what the final premium was. But if we could make that one small adjustment, we would appreciate it due to the estimate for the pollution coverage. So that's my brief introduction. I'm going to let Ronnie come up and talk about the process and how we ended up the year for the bulk of the coverage. Thank you.
I don't know how to switch the screens here. Just looks easy.
It's just
Easy breezy, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Ronnie Roush from Gallagher. I think most of you know me by this point. But what we want to do is for today, we're still going through the renewal process, but we want you to know where we are to date. We want to talk about the premium results to date We're going to go over the marketing efforts, where we went, what lines we really focused on. And then we have a little bit of a retention analysis, where your current retentions are. You know, you have excess programs, your retentions are fairly high. We had some Gallagher actuaries take a look and come up with an opinion. So basically what we did when we originally started the process, we talked about kind of indications, we talked about marketing strategy. Here on the workers' comp, the results on this were, it was a flat renewal, 0% increase in rate. You will see the premium went up 5.3%, but that's an increase in exposure. The rate remained flat. We have also this year included national averages, which actually we included last year, but this year we even have regional averages, which are a little more specific to Connecticut. So both of those were 0% increase in rate for workers' compensation. So that renewal was flat and it was expected. The next line is property. We all watch the news. You know, there's floods, there's earthquakes, there's, you know, catastrophe after catastrophe. The property market's getting hit really hard, and their reaction to that is to reduce terms and increase rates. The average national rate increase, this is an exposure, it's 21% increase in rate. Regionally, we're seeing about a 15 to 16% increase. Now, you're with Travelers. They came in with an average rate increase of 10.4%, which is well below the national as well as the regional average. The premium went up 16% because your values increased over 5%. We're doing a little work on this, and we're expecting Travelers to provide a reduction. We're just waiting to get something in writing from them on that. The excess general liability, you have a $250,000 retention. This basically came in, I'm looking here, it was above market. And the reason for that was last year we were able to get the failure to maintain, a carve back for the failure to maintain coverage. So if for some reason you can't supply people's water, there's coverage for that now. Last year, Travelers didn't charge for it. They made a mistake, they owned it, so we didn't pay additional for it last year, but this year they're looking for increase in rate on that. So that general liability is falling at an increase of 10% versus the national average of 6.8 and 5.8 for the regional. The law enforcement follows suit. That number is a lot smaller. It was an additional premium, $795. And we're working with Travelers on that as well. I don't know if we'll be successful, but we keep trying. The excess auto, you know, you're right where the average rate is. You know, it's 8% nationally, 7.3%. Regionally, you're at an 8.3% increase on that. Your exposure, your unit count went down almost 5%, which is leaving you with a total premium increase of about 5%. If anyone has any questions or comment, please feel free to interrupt me at any time.
If I could,
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, if I could ask a question. So it's not listed individually here as an item. At least I don't see it. So, but do we have any exposure for any of our, let's say, our property or facilities to flood insurance? Do we? Yeah, I know that that's been a concern for private property owners because the flood insurance rates are skyrocketing. You know, so. Do we have an exposure in that? Is it in general liability or is it somewhere else?
It's in property.
It's in where? I'm
It's
sorry.
in the property coverage, so property protects you for damage to your property from flooding. There is no coverage for flooding on the dams and the dikes, but you do have flood for certain of your facilities that are listed in your statement of values. Plus, in addition to that, you have, I believe it is 35 separate flood policies placed through the National Flood Insurance Program to
Those are
supplement
for
that.
individual properties and equipment and stuff like that, or?
There is flood, and in the places where you're in a high hazard flood zone, you have the National Flood Insurance Program. We have insurance through them. I believe it's 35 separate, it's per location you have to secure the coverage. So I believe it's 35 separate policies, plus coverage built into the property policy.
Thank you.
Yeah. And just as an FYI, after this, I'm going to speak about flood insurance for personal residences. So it is becoming a hot topic.
Chairman?
Yes.
Thank you. Regarding the national average, over the past year or 2 years at least, we've seen insurance companies walk away from providing coverage for a state or a large portion of a state. What impact is that having, and how is that computed and figured in to determining what the national average is?
Okay, so the national average, and this is all this data is compiled from Gallagher clients. And we have, we're large, we have a lot of them. And then we also own some third-party administrators who have that data as well. So that national average is an increase in rate. So what they're saying is for people who are going out and securing coverage, their rate is going up 7%. It's not including entities that can't secure insurance.
Well, I'm wondering whether that large increase in the national rate is due to insurance companies no longer providing coverage or
Oh, well,
something.
you're
And-
exactly right, because there's less
and if
competition.
that's true,
Yeah.
is there any footnote or anything that it would indicate to you or to us that how much of an impact that's actually having on that increase? Or it's forcing that increase to go higher than it should?
Yeah, we don't have the data, we just, to say what it's from, but I think if we looked historically, like even 2 years ago, the market was pretty hard, but if you looked in the past, maybe the average rate was 2%. Now it's 7%. And that's because there's a lack of capacity, the lack of competition, and, more carriers are paying out. So, I mean, does that answer your question? It's all wrapped in there, yeah.
And I was just wondering
And
whether
inflation.
there was something we could actually visualize that, okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Bill?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman. Flood insurance, in the event there was a failure of the dike in the South Meadows and we were flooded out, would we have coverage from this policy? Or that would be a flood?
It's under the property coverage. There is flood, there is a sublimit on it.
What's the sublimit?
I think it's
25 million, not enough.
20, thank you, I was going to say.
25 million.
Yeah, 25 million.
You're not
Yeah.
covered.
If I may, Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
to add to that question, and I think Commissioner Salami's question, the 750 million coverage, can you explain that is not by property? There's a limit to each piece of property, right? That's based on an aggregate of the properties within the flood zone. But how much money of the 750 can be applied to one single piece of property?
If it was flood, it would only be 25 million.
Okay,
But the 750 million is a blanket limit.
yeah.
And you would never need that for one property. But basically.
Well, actually, we would.
Definitely would.
The question, that's the question, what, the wastewater treatment plant, if it is if it is inundated by the dike system failing, you know, you're talking about not just the replacing and fixing the infrastructure, you're talking about people out of service, sewer service, out of, you know, so that, the question is, how much of that 750 can be applied to one individual piece of property?
For flood, it would be 25 million.
25 million only, okay, so we have a, you know, a $10 billion plant, and we only got $25 million in coverage for that dollar amount.
Yes.
Okay.
So one thing that I think is important to just point out, carriers can only put up so much capacity for flood, because if you have a loss like that, other entities are going to have a loss too, right? It's likely not just specific to MDC. It's going to be a catastrophe. So they put out as much as you can. You can go to the London market and purchase additional flood insurance. It tends to be very expensive. Would be happy to get you a quote to consider it. But what we find is most of our clients rely on FEMA, which is the Federal Emergency Management Association. And when there's a catastrophe, they help, they chip in, they help you get back together. And that's what our entities rely on.
Yeah, if I may, I'm going to answer your question. Here's the challenge, is that, so we're not in charge of the dike system, City of Hartford is. The Army Corps regulates the dike system.
Yep.
Through the Hartford Flood Commission and through the City of Hartford. So if the Hartford Flood Commission or the City of Hartford does not maintain their certification through FEMA as it relates to the maintenance of the dike, we're under the impression that there will be no coverage from FEMA on the dike system. So, is that your question?
No, that's part of it.
Good one.
I think there's a more significant issue here. We've got knowledge that there's definitely probably $100 million worth of improvement that has to be made. When the river gets to 35 feet, we've got a major chance of that happening, the failure of that dike, which will submerge 25% of the total city's grand list, the vast majority of which, for us, is in the South Meadows. And Scott says 10 billion, it's 10, 7, whatever it is, that far exceeds 25 million. And I guess the question is, what would be the position of FEMA? If we've got knowledge, and you've got a $100 million problem, and we've got a $7 billion exposure.
And I
So,
will have to
let
confirm
me
this
just,
for
could I
you.
just finish?
Okay.
So you're saying, what would be the quote that you go to the European or to the English market relative to an insurance policy that we would take out for that failure? It would have to be astronomical, I would assume, knowing what the
yeah.
background is.
Yeah.
So,
But I think with regard to FEMA, and I actually have an associate who's a FEMA expert down in Florida.
that's a
I
good
think
place
the
to.
city of Hartford wouldn't get reimbursed from FEMA. But if you're not responsible for it, if you're not, you're not, it's not your fault.
Well, it's
So
not.
my only, and we've talked a lot about this, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, we've talked a lot about this since 2013. And what we have learned, and may be true, may not be true, but it was our understanding that if the dike system is not held to the Army Corps standard,
Yeah.
and if it does not comply with the maintenance protocols necessary to achieve the certification, that the businesses behind the dike are not insurable. Now, I don't know if that's true. That's what we've been told, but that's a major question for us. Could we even get insurance? To the chairman's point, there's reports out there that say, as the chairman said, when literally engineering reports 2013-14 that says when the river gets to 30 feet in the Connecticut River, at the Buckley Bridge, the dike system will fail, period. So would there be an ability to even get insurance with a report out there like that?
I'll have to check with the FEMA expert,
Okay.
but my experience is that that's not going to be on you, but,
Can you
we
check
can
with
find
them
that out.
and just get us
Yeah.
something back,
Yep.
get something back to us?
Well-
The issue is one of control and who's responsible to repair or maintain the dike. And if we're not responsible, query whether we are no longer eligible for FEMA assistance if something should happen. So that would be important for us to
Yes,
know.
no, that's a very, definitely.
Mr. Patel?
We are aware of situation with dike. Maintenance part to keep it up to the standard was the city's responsibility. Is city is doing it or not doing it? That's number one question. Number two question is, we have the property there along with few others, but probably we are the most best. I mean, all properties is ours. What are we doing to work towards at least keeping it under FEMA standard so that FEMA doesn't say that, okay, it was not covered?
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
No, well, just, okay.
Yeah.
Buddy?
I had a little experience with this, with the state, and also for the town of East Hartford. We had
It's
to,
your side too. You got-
yeah, we had to make repairs to the dike on our side of the river, especially the north face of the dike, on the wet side of the dike, we needed repairs. And one of the questions came up was that, the dike, because the dike is there, the property owners on the dry side of the dike are not, the cost of flood insurance for them is kept down by FEMA. FEMA actually provides that. If the dikes weren't repaired, our understanding was that that you would have to pay the whole, the property owners there would have to pay at their own expense to protect their properties until the dike was fixed. We went ahead and fixed the dike, which was I think the right decision at the time. Was it was a considerable amount of cost to do it, but we went ahead and did it when the Army Corps told us we needed to do it. So I think all the questions are, we have the vast majority of, particularly the sewer side of our whole operation is right there behind the dike and is actually below the 30-foot level, and so if the dikes fail, we lose our sewage treatment plant, maybe not for East Hartford and Rocky Hill, Windsor, but for everybody else, it's gone, And this issue came up when we were talking about the tunnel, because the opening for the tunnel is in the same area, so if a flood got in over the top of the opening of the tunnel, would kind of fill up the tunnel. It would go backwards, we put the flood down the tunnel,
Yeah.
But I think the real question is, with the condition of the dike, at least in question it in some part, because the Army Corps, my understanding is the Army Corps has determined that work needs to be done to the dike.
Determined it with the study.
That, the expectation is that it will be done and, we won't have to protect, Scott says 10 billion, I know Bill says 7 billion, whatever it is.
Big money.
It's an awful big number. So I think we just want to be sure that, there's someplace we can go, because it's not a question of paying us for the damage. It's a question of us getting the thing operational again, like immediately. We don't have an opportunity to just walk away.
And litigate.
So I think we just want to be assured that, it's not so much the dollar amount, but that the assistance financially will be there to put it back in operation. That's the question, I think. And so I don't know if there's any more that you can find out for us on that, but I'm almost sorry I brought it up, but
No,
I don't
no,
mean to
it's
stop your whole
yeah.
presentation, it just seems like an important question.
It is important, and then, I can set up a call with Bob and Diana. We can get a property expert and a FEMA expert on the phone, just to see how it would affect you if the certifications weren't.
That would be great. And make sure that Scott and I get a or participate in that phone call, okay?
Okay.
Scott, you had something to say?
Yes, just to answer Commissioner Patel's question. So, as the chairman mentioned, the MDC, was really taking an initiative in 2012, 13, 14, trying to get this issue on the dike system resolved because we were aware of this report that was done by GEI. And some of the commissioners might remember, we actually, when we had a meeting down at the at 231 Brainerd, and GEI did a presentation on this very topic on the dike system, and that was probably 4 years ago, whatever the number was. That study and the Army Corps permitting process identified about $27 million of work in East Hartford and about $92 million worth of work in Hartford. And in all of the meetings that we had, Congressman John Lawson was very supportive of us with the Army Corps. We had multiple meetings with the Army Corps trying to find a way to get the Army Corps to fund a study and to fund some of these projects. Long and short of it, East Hartford did a lot of work on their own with that $27 million. They're well ahead of Hartford on improvements to the dike. However, in the last meeting, Chris Stone, myself, and the chairman was at Congressman Larson's office right here on Main Street, and suddenly the Army Corps said to us, to all of us, no problem. There's no problem with the dike system. We're on track to do the improvements. There's not a lot of money that's been spent on the dike system. GEI, who wrote the report, would argue that that's not true. I don't know where the city is, Commissioner, to your question. I don't know. We have asked the question, where are you with the I'm trying to remember that, what's the SWIFT, thank you. The SWIFT permitting process. The SWIFT process with the Army Corps is when you're out of compliance, you go into a SWIFT program and you're supposed to do certain things under certain conditions. And there has been work on the dike system, cutting, maintaining the dike system. There's been work done, but the majority of the work that addresses the boiling issue that we talk about on numerous occasions, which is really the stretch between the Buckley Bridge and the Founders Bridge, where the 26 feet of soil was removed to lower Route 91 under 84, that nothing's happened there. And that's really the biggest risk.
Two locations.
Right. And so you have two locations within that span, and the challenge is 30 feet, the hydraulic pressure, 30 feet of water is 15 feet, PSI, boom, it pushes it underneath. You're supposed to wink.
There are two problems. One, you said system design problem.
Yes.
Keep it separate.
Yeah.
Maintenance problem is something which is, when I was there, I remember certain maintenance was not that expensive.
Right.
Staff used to take care of that.
Right.
And recently, if you saw, they were cutting down some trees.
Yes.
And all that issues. And that can be maintained by us working together with the city.
Yes.
And then structural part, city and us jointly should look at what is the solution and how we can find the money.
Yeah.
There are federal programs available for different things, and you don't have to apply only for water programs. There may be transportation programs.
Sure.
And that we can look at it. CROG is the mediator in between. Money comes in, somebody should keep an eye where to go for that funding and apply for it. Mm-hmm. At CROG, I used to manage that program, and we have a program under which towns can apply, city can apply, and we go and say, okay, this is how much we need.
We'll reach out to Matt Hart, who used to be the town manager of West Hartford, is now the director, so we'll reach out to him.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
just a question, because Upham has more knowledge of it because he was there during this period of time. My understanding is the highway was dropped, the land barrier on the west side of the dike was eliminated. That would mean that to solve that problem, they should have put sheeting down, 46
75 feet.
75
feet.
feet. I don't understand that, and no one can find, there was some representation made that that was a responsibility of the city of Hartford. Why would it be a responsibility of the city of Hartford when 80% of the cost would be paid by the federal government for the highway being dropped?
It should not be the city of Hartford responsibility. It was DOT's responsibility. But what happens
That's where I'm
is
going.
that technically, when you, let's say we are looking for money to do something in that area, who is the applicant? The applicant will be city of Hartford. And then federal government looks at quote unquote city of Hartford responsible for taking care of that for next 30 years, the investment which you made. That's the only way they made the cities and towns responsible for it. But technically speaking, if DOT what they did, city should not be responsible for it.
I mean, well, if,
Yeah, we
from a
agree.
technical
It-
standpoint, it was designed improperly by not putting the sheeting down.
Well, it should have been added to the project, right? It
Right,
should have been added to the project.
And 80% of the projects being paid
Right.
for by the federal government. Why would the city assume responsibility for 100% of the cost to drive 75 foot of sheeting down when they were doing it? So, I mean, it's a hard argument for DOT to sustain relative to the logic.
Only
of-
solution is, rather than talking, sit with DOT and find out the program and apply for permanent correction.
Mr. Curry, and then I'm going to,
But that's not the part of the
then
this
I'm gonna
discussion, so we can leave it and we discuss that separately. Yes.
I'm going to suggest that we cut this off, that we proceed with the insurance matter. I think this is a matter that should be raised elsewhere to be discussed in some detail, because I think that it really is sort of beyond our scope.
Significant
Thank you, Mr.
liability.
Mr.
Chairman.
Curry, yes.
Through you, we've had these same discussions for at least 10 years, and nothing has changed for the good. The situation's only gotten worse. We know, moving into budget deliberations, we can't afford a rider for multi-billion-dollar. And we're looking at a quality of life for tens of thousands of people should a worst-case scenario happen. So I'm asking through you that as part of the budget deliberations, that we ask our Corporation Council to draft a letter this year and every year thereafter, and I suspect that this year's letter could probably be reused based on the last 10 years, to the city of Hartford, saying we have these concerns. The dike needs to be addressed, however they do it, whether they reach out to Congress or they reach out somewhere else. But at this point, they're the catalyst that needs to take the corrective action. So to just CYA-MDC, I would like such a letter drafted each and every year.
We'll do this at another meeting
Yeah.
as soon as we can. All right, any other, I'm going to cut this off and ask that you proceed, please.
Sure. And we're going to get that meeting set up early next week, maybe. Work for Bob and Diana.
Can you also, Ronnie, can you get a quote from London on what it would cost to cover, so we have a cost-benefit analysis of coverage or no coverage?
Yeah, we can get you a quote. I can tell you the pricing is,
I understand.
I know. I just want to let you know.
But I think
It won't be a bargain,
the
but we're
committee
happy.
should, the committee should know what it is, that's all.
Yeah.
$7 billion.
Whatever it is.
That's right.
Cover it, $7 billion.
Yeah.
Looks like it's frozen.
Yeah, right. We're gonna cut the two of your salaries and pay
They
for it.
probably let us pay over 7 years, though.
2 months.
Easy.
2 months.
Listen to the peanut gallery.
It just moved, thank you.
That was a good observation.
Okay,
Appropriate
can
here.
you proceed?
Sure. So the next two lines on the next spreadsheet is the crime and the fiduciary. Those are really, I guess, smaller dollar placements. You know, if you look at the crime, it went up $284. That's a 5.6% increase, but that takes into account a 2.3% increase in employee count. So it's right around the national and regional average, which was slightly below 3%. This is at 3.2. The fiduciary, small dollars once again, but the average rate was 12.4%, which is significantly lower than the national and regional average. The public entity liability, this one, you had a 6.2% increase in rate. We're basing it on employees. The national average 4.1, the regional is 3.5. This one, there's still a large loss on this, which should be falling off on the 24 renewal. So that's, averages don't necessarily point that out. We are still working with Chubb on that. The next one, the cyber liability, that market has been really, really tough. It's calmed down a bit this year. There's more competition. But overall, you have a little over 3% decrease in premium. Where, you know, people are looking average 16 to 21% if you take into account your decrease in exposure. Kudos to your IT department. That's a job well done right there. It's a very technical application, and not too many people are seeing decreases. So, congrats on that. Once again, the excess police professional, very, very small dollars. It was actually a flat renewal. And then as Bob pointed out, we're working on the pollution. That will be a 3-year deal. But we got some time on that just to make sure that we can get the most competitive deal out there. So this is like saving the worst for last. The umbrella tower is obviously an important driver of your program. You carry $50 million of liability. There was a big increase with Travelers on their primary. And that was once again because of the failure to supply. They didn't charge for it last year. It's in there now. They're trying to get some additional premium dollars. That being said, that $5 million with Travelers, and they don't know this, we don't tell them, even with that increase, that premium is very, very competitive. What we were able to do is we negotiated with the next few layers, and we got 6% increase, 8%, with the national average 11%, regional about 9.9. Typically, the way a tower works, if the underlying policy goes up 20%, the next layer goes up 20%, the next layer goes up 20%. So we were able to negotiate lower increases on that. Where we're struggling right now with the last $25 million, which was with Great American. What they did is they came in at the last minute and they said, oh, we're not going to offer $25 million, we're going to offer $15 million. And they're moving up higher in the tower, so we had to go in and get $10 million to sit excess of Westchester, or I guess it was AWAC, excuse me. And the pricing went up considerably. So basically, the $25 million last year was $161,500. This year, it's $212,495. We are all over that. We are trying to get new carriers in there. We're trying to move the layers around, anything we can do to save premium dollars. Great American did come back and say they were going to reduce it $7,000. We said it's not enough. Don't even send the quote. We want to talk to you more about it. We want to talk about this. So that's what we're working on, to see if we can get that reduced. That was the big surprise.
Just a question, Ronnie. We talked about this at the last meeting, but this traveler's policy, which is really designed around the ability for us not to provide service, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it's gone up 20%, or $20,000, 48%. I'm assuming this is going to continue to go up. We talked about this before, but I guess the question we have is, what is this buying for us? Because we have yet to, in most cases, not be able to not provide service, right? And if this rate is going to continue to rise, I guess the question is, what are we buying? What is it that we're buying? If we're talking about a catastrophic failure of our system, and earthquake, whatever it might be, a dam failure, whatever that might be, where we actually couldn't provide water to everyone, could you just explain what the $5 million and the $1 million covers? What is that for the year? Is that for an incident? Is that for?
It's per occurrence and aggregate,
Okay.
yes. And all those sit on top of each other for 50 million total.
Okay, but all the 50 million would be applied to not being able to serve?
Yes.
Okay,
There's no failure to supply exclusion in there.
okay,
So one thing, and you can't predict what a carrier is going to do next year, but Travelers is looking for this as a one-time because they gave you the coverage last year and they didn't charge for it. So they can't come back next year and say they're charging for it again. We're
Right.
not going to forget that. I can't say the rates won't go up.
sure.
I can't say they won't go down, but it's really a one-time. When we're talking about, property coverage and what happens to your properties, if a dam, dike, something malfunctions, this is for customers. You can't supply businesses because something fails. I think it's an important coverage to have in there. We did ask, I know there was some talk about maybe it wasn't that important. I want to knock on wood. And, Travelers said they would reduce the premium slightly. But I wouldn't recommend that.
Yeah, I just go to the question, what does it actually do for the MDC? Because I won't name names, but there's towns out there that serve themselves, and it could take them 4 days to fix a water main break, right? We don't take 4 days. We take probably the longest period of time that it took us to fix a water main was on Farmington Avenue in 2008, when we had, it was a major problem because our infrastructure was so old and shutting the water mains down. And we were probably out for 16 hours, but not everybody was out of water. And so there's very few times that probably in our history where the storms that we've had, Alfred, Katrina, our customers did not have water.
Right.
So my question is, under what circumstances would we need an insurance policy like this? And if we did need it, would it actually cover the costs associated with it?
So this policy is going to cover the financial damages for third parties.
Yep.
So say, for instance, I don't know, UConn has to shut down. I don't know who you're.
We're okay with that.
Oh, okay. A hospital,
We don't serve
multiple businesses.
Oh, you can, yeah.
Okay, so their loss of income, their extra
Sure.
expenses to get back up, that's what that would cover. It would cover, loss of life if that were to happen.
Okay. Okay, it's, so the only thing I would suggest is maybe we ask, legal to review, is we have a policy, a claims policy that we've implemented consistently over many, many years. And when we refer to an act of God, we do not pay. This is implying we'll pay. So it contradicts our own claims policy. So we might want to think about it, because if you're opening the door to something we've never done before. If it's an act of God, we didn't do anything wrong. It was a torrential downpour, or it was something that we had no control over. The MDC doesn't pay. We had a a number of circumstances, and we've been very consistent over the years to follow that policy. So I just would ask, does imposing a policy like this on ourselves now open us the door to being exposed to those conditions that we've never been exposed to? That's all.
So, and I understand the act of God, but if somehow, if there was a failure to maintain something properly,
You still have to show, in order to initiate the coverage, you have to show that somehow we were negligent.
exactly,
Right.
So if it's the
exactly.
fault of others, act
Yeah.
of God or whatever, what have you, or it's a problem with a lateral that's controlled and owned by the homeowner, whatever it might be, not only would we not need the coverage, but this coverage wouldn't kick in.
Yeah,
Based
they
upon our
do-
policy,
they-
and based
they-
upon the law.
They have to typically prove negligence or alleged negligence. Sometimes carriers will just settle because it's less expensive and it looks like it's going in that direction.
Well,
It
if they just
makes sense.
allege negligence, does the policy cover cost of defense?
Yes,
That's important coverage.
yes.
Right, but just to clarify, so we have 3 policies, right? So act of God, we do nothing, we don't reimburse. If the water main break or a sewer collapse or a blockage, then we make the home habitable. If there is a negligence component to it, then we make the house habitable and we reimburse for the finishes within the home. But we don't and have never reimbursed people for their water service that they haven't had access to. I'm just suggesting we should look at this because it's we've never done this before. And I don't know if we're opening ourselves up to a whole different animal. We had in the past, and this is not so much a water service, but in the past, in the early 2000s and 2000, up through full separation in Franklin Avenue, Albany Avenue, there was a big push by the community that they wanted to be reimbursed for impact to businesses due to traffic, due to congestion, due to construction. The DOT, the state, we've been very consistent. We don't reimburse for the fact that our product is intruding on your business. I just would ask, are we
No, that's
opening
all.
ourselves up to something that we've never exposed ourselves to before by having this coverage? That's my question.
We'll address that. Generally, having insurance is not an admission of liability for the
Yep.
event, but we'll look at that.
Yeah.
I'll get something to it. Don't worry about it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Scott, have we had this type of policy in the past? And or is this the first year for this type of policy?
We haven't had this coverage in the past, right? They gave it to us for free last year. They didn't know it. We didn't know it.
Yeah.
We got it for free, but I guess that's the question. Typically when, I'll give you an example of a leak. We have a policy that we follow. So for example, if Mrs. Jones has a leak in her toilet and it's been running for 30 days and that could be $5,000, easy. We follow a process to make sure that we verify that there was a leak in the toilet, and we make an adjustment, a leak adjustment. And we have over the years utilized the raw water rate as a leak adjustment. So if you leaked water, it's our job. It's not our job to maintain your home. It's not our job to maintain your toilet, but we recognize that things happen, and so we provide a leak adjustment, right? So that's the way we haven't reimbursed our customers forever as it relates to, and not lack of water service. I mean, there's numerous times where we have customers who are out of water for 4 hours in the middle of the night, or 4 hours during the day, or it could be 8 hours. But relatively, our cruise is so good. 4 hours is a big. Most of them are much quicker than that in terms of restoring service. I just hate to see us go down a path that we've never gone down before with dealing with adjusting people's water bills, monthly bills, because they were out of service for 4 hours.
Oh, and then one last question for Gallagher is, could you explain what happened last year? We received $2 million worth of coverage for free?
No. So your liability program covers all kinds of things in that tower. It covers your failure to supply. if there was something, if you were responsible and caused significant flooding, damage to businesses, to properties, to lives, that would cover it. If you had a employee out on the road who was driving a vehicle and hit a school bus full of children, that would be covered.
No, I understand that, but you said that we received policies without being charged. Could you explain that?
No, so historically, and last year, you had a failure to supply exclusion built into your liability tower. So that was never covered. We asked travelers to include it, and they did. They didn't charge you for it. But they were saying they should have, and we said, well, it's too late.
But there were no claims made.
No.
No, but this year they're looking
harm, no
for,
foul.
yeah. You know, and you don't want the claims to be made, but
No, but they would have covered if there was one.
there would have been. So that tower covers more than just failure to supply, and there's a very large retention. I think it's 250,000 to start. So it's not going to cover, you know, when you're a residence that was out for 4 hours. That's not what it's intended to cover.
Thank you.
Curry, this is the last.
Thank you. I think the question I would ask myself, if Great American came to us last year and said, you know, MDC is a very responsible company, and we're going to provide this insurance to you for free this year, but next year, it's going to be $212,000. What would we have done last year had we known that then? And if what I think we would have done, then I'm suggesting we listen to what Scott has said, and maybe we don't need this coverage.
The coverage actually was from travelers. They charged $20,000.
Travelers, I'm sorry.
Great American is a separate situation. They just are looking at their book. They want less capacity and more money. They want more money like everybody, right? I want more money too. I'm not getting it. But, so that's a completely different situation. What we're looking at now for travelers is $20,000 for that.
Penny here, penny there, you know.
I know.
It's 20,000 additional.
Additional, yes.
It's 60,000.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was 40.
It was 41, it's 60.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the question is, what's going to be next year?
Yeah.
And the year after?
So they shouldn't be charging more for the failure to supply. You should be back with what typical rates are, with whatever inflation is, whatever the market is bearing. I mean, you can have
I
a
may,
decrease.
Mr. Chairman.
All right, let's, we're sort of flogging this,
Yeah.
I think, and chewing our time up here. So I'm going to cut this off after you,
fine.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, just real quick, and I think it's just important to answer this question. What does it do for us, really? What does it do? My question, and I think Kelly or Bob, do we know how many leak dollars? How much money did we return to customers based on leak coverage or leak adjustments?
I don't have that.
Is it a rough guesstimate?
Under 250,000.
Yes.
How much is it?
Under.
No, but do we have a number? Is
don't
it,
have
is
the
it 10,000? Is it 20,000? Is it 500,000? Is it?
They're infrequent and they're for varying amounts. Sometimes you find something that went
Yeah.
3 months and sometimes you found something
Yeah.
3 weeks.
Now, if this coverage covered something like that, I'd say that's a deal, right? But we're paying out leak coverage. We're reducing people's rate because they had a leak in their home, they had a leak in their yard. But I just have a question, just a
Is the
basic question.
deductible 250,000 per
Per occurrence, yes.
per home
No, per occurrence.
or current?
So if 10
many
homes
homes?
were affected by the one occurrence,
We gotta pay 250.
yeah.
250,000.
Can I just give you a similar but different type of example? I mean, if you had a building collapse and you had people in it that weren't employees, that would be covered under that tower. So I have a client, this was several years ago, and they have what they call a defect in the road statute. So if you're hurt on a highway because of defect in the road, bodily injury, lose a tire, or even your life, you collect $4,000. All right. tunnel collapses, 5 o'clock in the morning. A young woman was killed. Okay, that defect in the road statute wasn't going to hold up in front of a jury. Okay, that claim was settled really quick with the insurance company. So, you know, it's for a catastrophe type loss. And thank goodness it was at 5 in the morning, because who knows how many people would have been in that tunnel. So that's, you know, and we do benchmark. We benchmark you with other similar institutions, what entities, what type of limits they carry. So I get it, like the failure to supply might not be a big concern, but if somehow a whole city couldn't, you know, all the businesses went out, that could add up pretty quick. The smaller ones you have under control, for sure. We good? All right. So we'll be back, hopefully with better news. We're working on it still.
Well, no, wait a minute.
Thank you.
We have to take an action.
Yes, and we need an amendment, which I can explain.
All right,
Coverage on
because there is an amendment.
dike.
right? Yes.
Call Lloyd's of London, 7B.
Let's see that.
Or go to the casino more often.
Okay,
5-minute
this
stretch.
is John Myrtle. We have a proposed amendment. Bob Barron described at the beginning that the environmental pollution policy is, the premium is estimated. So the proposed amendment is to account for that and have PPI authorize the remainder of the insurance coverages and limits and the premiums that were shown in that document. But to, I'll read it. It's a little small, hard to see. So in the resolution, we would add a second further resolved paragraph after the first one. And it would read, further resolved, the final premium cost for environmental pollution liability coverage is still pending at the time of this approval. Therefore, staff is authorized to bind and place environmental pollution liability coverage at an average annual premium cost not to exceed $200,000, and the total authorized premiums for all coverages shall not exceed $2,201,589. So that's a delta of about $10,300 from the total figure that you have, sorry, right down there, the 1.92.
That's the 2,200, 589, is that correct?
Yes, $2,201,589.
And I think what I'm going to suggest here is that we approve the amendment first, right?
Okay.
And then we will act and then approve the resolution as amended,
Yes.
okay? May I have a motion to approve the proposed amendment?
So move.
Second.
Any discussion?
Does this include the umbrella excess coverage that we just talked about? Why are we gonna vote on this when we're in question on whether or not we even need this? What's it doing for us? So we're gonna vote on this in advance to knowing whether or not, you know, all Scott's questions have been answered? And
We can bring this back, because she owes us information on the other item, and if the board so chooses, based on the questions that we've asked.
Bob, do you have any questions?
Excuse me, I just, you know, my understanding is that what Bob has asked for is a ceiling amount, not,
That's
Right.
right.
you know, it's like a maximum amount.
Right.
So we don't have to spend all that. He's just asking to,
We don't have to buy
All
your
right.
insurance.
It's up to.
We don't
am I
have
right
to
about
buy
that?
the
I don't know,
insurance.
John, you wanna,
Up to.
can you read
We'll
that again?
report
or-
back on the results of the,
Yeah.
getting that information.
you're right, Commissioner, thank
In
you.
addition, these policies renew in 10 days. So I need your authorization to sign for up to that amount. Ronnie had said that casualty number might come in 7,000 less. You're not approving for me to sign each of the dollar amounts. You're approving for me to sign up to that total premium amount. Because what I hope to report, just as I did last year, is that you gave me an approval to sign up to a certain amount. and I actually reported back that we signed lower. The year-over-year premium actually went down last year. So that's what I would request, is an approval to sign up to the $2.2 million, not to exceed that amount, and I'll report back any premium reductions that we got beyond what you saw this evening.
But right now, we've moved and seconded the approval of the amendments as written. And unless there are any questions or concerns, I'm going to ask that we vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. I will then ask for a motion approving the resolution as amended.
Move adoption of the resolution as amended.
May I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Thank you. We move to item 5, a report with regards to affirmative action.
Mr. Chairman, how about a 5-minute stretch our leg break?
Okay. Approved? Okay.
Poor Ronnie, I think she's like, this is a tough client.
It's like they're ready to do that field goal. Time.
When I wasn't swinging, I played phenomenal.
Second session. We will continue report with regard to affirmative action. It's item 5 on the agenda.
Good afternoon. I'm Rita Kelly. As you know, I'm the EEO officer and the whistleblower complaint coordinator. Basically, what I wanted to do today, I've given previous presentations on the affirmative action program, so I don't think I have to do a full presentation on that, but I did want to share some of my thoughts and some information regarding, to provide you rather with a context from an EEO perspective concerning some of the data and information that Jamie will be sharing with you. I believe it's important that I put it within a context so it can be more clearly understood in terms of how data is used, the limitations of data, and also other methods that are used by EEO and human resources in regards to doing assessments of the workplace and making sure that people are treated fairly and equitably. Basically, my role as an EE officer is to barriers that create difficulty in terms of individuals who are seeking equal opportunity in the workplace. And my role is to identify solutions to these barriers and work with the managers and supervisors and human resources within the district to resolve these problem areas. In my role as the AA person, data collection is important. Metrics are important. But what I really want to talk to you about is that there's a limit to how data can be used, and it's only one indicator of what is going on in an organization, and that other indicators have to be looked at. Now, it's important to note that as the affirmative action person, it's important, and it's my role as established by the Commission on Human Rights and Opportunities to look at all personnel transactions, all of them. That includes recruitment, hires, interviews, promotions, terminations, every single transaction, and to look for patterns in terms of if people are being treated based on a protected class, to look for ways that perhaps there's some sort of disparate impact that's having a negative impact on one group opposed to another. Now, in terms of MDC, the ideal situation is that affirmative action and human resources can work together collaboratively and look at these transactions together. And I would like to say that that is being done here at MDC. When hires are made, I look through the applicant pool to make sure every effort is made to diversify the pool. I'm not saying that there aren't any problems, but what I am saying is that their efforts are made continuously to constantly review information, constantly review recruitments, applicants pools to make a concerted effort, a good faith effort to ensuring that our workforce does become more diverse. Now, the major purpose, one of the major purposes of individually reviewing employment transactions is to ensure that established processes are followed and employees are not treated differently because of a protected class. Now, in my role as EEO officer, I am responsible for the EEO policy, which speaks to discrimination. You know, as you know, we do have a employee manual, and within this manual are policies. It's important that all policies and procedures be applied in the same manner, you know, for all employees. So that would be one of the purposes of any review, was to make sure that policies and procedures as prescribed are followed. And if they're not followed, what is the reason that they are not followed? Now, one of the issues that I see in terms of just solely looking at data is that if you look at the terminations, data alone doesn't tell the full story. You have to look at the dynamics behind each individual situation. For example, a termination typically would follow progressive discipline, including serious violations of policy. If there are questions whether an employee is being disciplined more heavily because of their protected class, there is a process whereby I would work closely with human resources to review the matter. So you don't look at a data analysis to see if there is discrimination going on. You look at the individualized situation, see what's going on. For example, if somebody came to me and said, well, I'm being subjected to progressive discipline, and I feel strongly that this is harassment, what I would do, and they say it's based on a protected class, what I would do is do an investigation and work with HR in terms of this initiative. And some of the steps within this review would be ask the employee to explain why they feel that they're being treated differently. Have the employee identify other employees who he or she believes were treated more favorably. Then also, there would be an option to meet with managers involved in these disciplinary decisions and get some sort of understanding in terms of why these decisions have been made, and to see if some determination can be made whether or not people are being treated equally by this supervisor or manager in regards to discipline. And then there would be an assessment in terms of whether the disciplinary policy was consistently applied, and if employees who committed similar infractions were not punished or were punished less severely than the person who is making the complaint. So when you see, you know, people being terminated or people talking about discrimination, a lot of instances, what you don't see, the efforts that go on beyond the scenes to use data in terms of comparative analysis, to look at the individual situation, to look at the varying dynamics within the situation, and to actually come up with a determination as to whether or not discrimination has happened. One of the frustrating things in being in this job is that a lot of times, you know, I do investigations, and in fact, this is an investigation that was done early this year, where employees come to me with concerns, and they are reviewed by me, and I work with managers in HR to resolve them. However, when the investigation is finished and findings and recommendations are made, because I'm limited to what information I can share, I cannot talk about them. I cannot talk about investigations. I cannot talk about the outcomes of the investigations. So there could be a perception that when people discriminate or they act inappropriately, nothing happens to them because people don't see the outcome. However, I will tell you that according to the professional standards of an affirmative action EEO person, we are sworn to confidentiality. I just cannot talk about it. However, I want people to be aware that the process does happen and investigations are made, you know, findings are made, recommendations are made. The data will not show you that. Now, if I when I work with staff, rather, what happens a lot of times, people it's important that staff trust me. And by ensuring confidentiality, you also build a trust relationship. But employees do come to me, and a lot of times what they will say is that they just want to talk. They're not sure if it's discrimination or not, but they just want to talk it through. Now, before I could go forward with any discrimination complaint, number one, I have to do an assessment. I have to have some indication that the individual was treated differently because of a protected class. If they come to me and they say everybody in their division, which is maybe, has a variety of race and genders, have been discriminated against, that isn't discrimination as it's defined by discrimination law. It has to be based on a protected class. So I have to make a determination in terms of whether or not it comes under my jurisdiction. And also, I have to ensure that they understand that I cannot do anything or go forward with any discrimination complaint or any complaint without their permission to do it. And a lot of times people want guidance, they want information, they want comparative data, they want a lot of things, but they don't want to provide their name. And that does create a problem. However, when people come to me confidentially, what I do is I try to provide them with direction, with guidance. Even if it doesn't come under my jurisdiction, what I will do is encourage them to talk to HR or go to CHRO if they're not satisfied with what I say. And I try to keep a continuing dialogue to ensure if they do change their decision not to go forward, that they feel comfortable going forward. So confidentiality is important in terms of my role. And the data that Jamie will be presenting, I think could, from the perspective, you're not looking at all of these individual situations, you're not looking at the dynamics behind what happened, you might not see the whole picture. So I just wanted to say that. Any questions? Okay, all right, Jamie.
Okay. Good afternoon, commissioners. I have agenda item 6. I was asked specifically for some data, so I'll kind of be piggybacking on a lot of what Rita had shared. What was distributed to everybody, I don't believe it was in the agenda packet, but it was distributed, was a couple different data points specific to this bullet item number 6. I think first and most importantly, the data that was presented was this 5-year analysis. It's the workforce analysis. It's in fact what we are judged on by the CHRO when we submit annually for our affirmative action program. We, again, take great efforts throughout the year to make sure we are communicating and that we are actively engaged in all of our employment actions. We've been very successful with the CHRO for the past 12 years at least. Our affirmative action plans have been approved. Does that mean we've met all of our goals? No. But does that mean we have made a good faith effort in achieving those goals? Yes, we have. And the CHRO has found that we are successful in, again, putting forth a good faith effort. We do have some problem areas that Rita had alluded to. So in this data, again, this is really, it's another data point. It's a snapshot in time, but this specifically, our affirmative action plan runs from May 1st to April 30th. So it crosses calendar years. The biggest problem area we seem to have on the affirmative action side in terms of really meeting our goals is the skilled craft area. Year after year, that's what we spend the most time talking to the CHRO about. It's that our skilled craft area has a lot of our operational positions in it. So our utility maintainer series, our facility maintainer series, amongst some other job classifications. Along with some of those jobs is the requirement of a CDL. The MDC, like every other organization, I think across the country at this point, is struggling to find CDL drivers, especially CDL drivers that are minorities. That's not an easy thing to find, but we are doing everything we can to try to tackle that problem. We're trying to think outside of the box and come up with creative ways to tackle that because we know that's our problem point. But again, even with that challenge that we have year after year, the CHRO still has approved our plan for 12 years in a row. So again, I do think that's a success overall. So again, I just wanted to touch on the workforce analysis because this, again, is what we're judged on, and I thought that was the most important data point that I can give you. Further, I was asked for more specific data over a 5-year period. So what I did was I tried as best I can to provide that data on an annualized basis. Again, it's a point in time, so every day this data changes if I was to run a report. So again, tried to give the general data that was requested in terms of head counts, as well as budgeted positions, tried to break it down again by union affiliation. We obviously have 3 unions and then the non-union folks. So you'll see on this form here, I tried to summarize some of that data along with breaking out some of the promotions, new hires, and separations and retirements, as that was some of the data that was requested. I'm not sure if there are specific questions about that. Yes, Commissioner.
How come you didn't, unless I didn't see it, how come you didn't provide a chart on breakdowns of fully, number of people in the whole organization? Is there one in there?
Oh, I did. Yep, the very first chart is the first column says head count as of January 1st. So again, moving target, but as of January 1st of those 5 years, that's what the head count was, and then the budgeted positions. And then the chart right below that breaks down that head count by union.
No, but you didn't break it down by ethnic origin or gender for the whole.
That I kind of left to the workforce analysis. It piggybacks on it a little bit. So the workforce analysis, because this is what we're being judged on, I provided it in that format. If there's something further that's needed, though, we can talk about that. Are there any other specific questions?
I'm sorry.
I have a question
Yes.
with the management. In terms of sick time, we provide 15 days. Do we allow people to accumulate and take it at the end of the service or some compensation?
Yes.
Yes,
And if
so.
we do that, how are we trying to control abuses?
Thank you. So if you remember, and it's part of, we'll be talking about this as part of the agenda item for the pregnancy policy. But if you may remember, the MDC used to give 15 days to our union employees and to our E&Es. So the way that we followed the typical process is whatever we give the unions, we typically give the E&Es. 2000, pick a number, whatever the date was, we changed that policy for the E&Es of 2016 or
2017.
17. We changed the policy. We created a policy that said we're going to create a lot of new employees would come in and they didn't have any sick time. And because they didn't have any sick time, under the policy of pregnancy, we are required to comply with federal, state, FMLA. We must protect your job for 12 weeks. Here at the MDC, if you have sick time, vacation time, you can use that to pay yourself while you're out. Instead of that, we created a policy which was short-term, long-term disability. What that did for the new employee was it provided them with something they didn't have. What it did for the rest of the employees was the way in which we justified is that we reduced everyone's 15 days E&Es down to 8, which was really not fair. We just changed that policy in this past year where we said we really believe that giving our E&Es, because the unions we were trying to get the unions to agree to a similar policy, 8 days with some short-term, long-term. They would not have it. They didn't want anything to do with it. So we felt a fairness issue. We brought back to this board and to the full board to reinstate the 15 days for all of our E&E employees. And so that is great. And I think the employees appreciate that and appreciate the support from PPNI and the full board. the policy regarding sick time, they can accumulate. We have a unwritten rule that's been followed for years at the MDC that was not consistent, and we have called a 68-hour rule. And the 68-hour rule is almost identical to the state of Connecticut's rule. The state of Connecticut had this rule: if you take a sick day before or after a holiday, it was an occurrence or something like that. And they had all these rules. And basically they were saying, don't abuse your sick time. You're getting 15 days. I think the state was 12, but you're getting right? Was it 12 or 15? Whatever it was. But the policy is and was, you're getting 15 days, but please don't abuse it, and we hold you accountable. Now, in the process and the policy, we actually put that 68-hour rule into the contract, but we actually bumped it up because we said with the whole new wellness program, the union said fairly, but I'm going to have to go to the doctor more often. So how can you beat me up for using 68 hours? So we actually bumped that to 80?
80 hours.
80 hours. So now the 68-hour rule is now here. You can use up to 80 hours without being, disciplined or being counseled on abusing your sick time. You can save all of that time and you can bank that time. And then when you retire, there's rules that you can take up to 60 days of your sick time. There's some more complicated components to it with vacation. But yes, they're allowed in an identical to the state system, almost identical. We've made some great changes to deal with the abuse commissioner. What we've done is, and it's not so much abuse. There is abuse, but there is an issue with sick time where we have an employee that is getting ready to retire, and Medicare is not as good as our insurance program, right? So if an employee says, I'm going to go and get my knees done, my legs done, my hip done, and all this stuff because I'll get better coverage while I'm here at the MDC. They're using up their sick time, which they have the right to do, but now we're paying overtime for people to backfill that person. So what we did in this contract is we said, instead of 60 days, we're going to encourage you to save 100 days. So we've brought that up to 100. And the whole idea of it, the goal of it is to encourage employees to save more time. And that's how we're trying to address those issues you raised.
Jamie, I'd like to ask, and Scott has talked about this a number of times, but you did mention that we're experiencing a great difficulty in hiring skilled workers. And I think that's probably true across not just the MDC, but across, not just other utilities, but just about everywhere. I've had a long experience both in a number of different ways with all the tech high schools and the community colleges throughout the state. So I thought, and I believe we do. We had relationships with Prince Tech and Cheney Tech, and if there's any way that as Nantucket has a whole program for mechanical and kind of stuff and everything, aerospace kind of things, and I don't know if we took a larger role with those, if it would help, I'd certainly like to see it help us before it helps us. But for instance, with Grasso Tech in New London, Electric Boat basically came in and I just none of this is confidential. It was a long time. It was a while ago. It was probably 10 years ago. But came in and basically built a separate little section for them. To train people on how to do, specialty welding, had to be done in a glove box with no oxygen in it and all those. And they pretty much guaranteed that anybody that could get through this whole course, that they would hire them on the spot. They would, because they needed welders so badly. And I don't know if there's anything, if we do have a direct relationship. I know we had instructors from I think, what's his name, Wall was at Goodwin University for a while teaching some of this. Yeah. Yep. So I don't know if just talk about that. If there's a way that we need to improve that relationship or try to get that going. I think there are commissioners, myself included, who might be willing to help work on that, because I think it's we're talking about entry-level jobs.
Yeah.
Sort of, for the most part, and these are exactly the kind of jobs that a lot of the graduates from the high school part of it and from the adult ed part of it, are looking for. So, I don't know if there's anything else we can do, but if there's anything else you think you can do, Scott, and you want us to help you, I'd be more than willing to do that, because when I taught at Prince Tech.
Yep.
Every one of the people that I taught had a job already.
Yeah, they were, yeah.
And their employers were paying for them one way or another to go to school and get this certification, at the same time. And I don't know if there's anything we can do, but it seems like a major problem.
Yes, and if I may, Mr. Chairman. So, yes, there is a problem. And as you said, it's across, you talk to our tunneling contractor. Tunneling contractors are, this is a job where you travel across the world, right? And they're struggling to find people who want to do that. We're struggling to find people that don't want to work from home. And I'm talking about construction people, right? People say, I don't want to work from home. I want to work from home. So in the issue regarding North Hartford project area and all the things that we committed to, we would require our contractors to hire 30% of the workforce will be Hartford residents. We've never done that before, ever. The city of Hartford does when they fund their own projects. We said, if it's good enough for the city of Hartford, we're going to apply this to the Clean Water Project. Deep approved it, and we are committed to that, and we're achieving that goal. Jeff King is here, and Jeff, I'm glad you're here, because would you please sit up here real quick? Sure. And so as part of that discussion, we had to figure out a way, how do we build capacity so that we can fill the 30% requirement? Well, the first thing we did was we said to our existing contractors that are on call, our accelerated water main and sewer projects that we talked about today, we said, can you achieve the 30% goal? And they said, yes, we will. And they have. Jeff's job is to manage that and to make sure in the field that they're actually complying with that. The first pay recs for Durham Street will be coming in this coming week. But visually, we see and talk, Jeff's out there talking to residents on Durham Street. We had our Tower Avenue lighting project. We had 5 Hartford resident people working on the project, okay? So that's great news. But to your point, we said, but that's not enough, because we also have our own internal problems. So I tasked Chris Levesque and Jeff King and Viviana to say, and Kelly to say, we've got to find another source of employees for our future, for our contractors and for the MDC. So we reached out to a number of different people, including the feds, and we were made aware of a number of programs through MCC and through Construction Institute. And they told us about a couple of different programs. And the union, a gentleman named Mr. Cathcart, I have a tough time with his name, Cathcart, is basically developed a union program through the school system, Hartford school system, for DOT to create and develop a Hartford kids through the school system to get into an apprentice program. And then as part of that conversation, we also reached out to Prince Tech, because Prince Tech has its own program, somewhat similar and connected to the Cathcart program. And we've been working with both of those groups really since, how long, Chris? We started, we met with them 2 months ago, whatever it might be. Yeah, July. But we started meeting with this group, and Jeff is the one who really spearheads this issue. But Jeff, why don't you just talk about what you're doing with that program?
Yeah, so we actually had a meeting last week Friday with Chris Venable from Ready CT. They do a lot of programs with the schools already, getting kids over to Pratt and Whitney and various companies throughout the state. So we met with Chris from Ready CT, Sherry Pratt, DOT, Jeff Cathcart, and we're setting up a mini job fair at the Hartford Public Schools. So we're looking to meet with the kids and really start, finding kids that want to work for the MDC, want to work with our contractors, do that kind of matchmaking stuff. I was actually in contact with, Brett McCarthy. He's the Department of Education Technical High School contact for the work-based learning program. So I'm going to meet with him and start looking at kids that are excelling in each of the departments that these schools have. So whether it's plumbing, whether it's electrical, whether it's bioscience, whether it's diesel mechanics, we want to find kids that want exposure and just introduce them to what MDC is doing, what the Clean Water Project is about, and the opportunities we have. Jamie had created, I think, 5 entry-level positions. So you have wastewater treatment operator, water treatment operator, control specialist. So we're taking those 5 entry-level positions, meeting with the schools, whether it's Prince Tech, EC Goodwin, Cheney Tech, the Hartford public school system, and looking to develop that relationship so we can start getting kids interested in what the MDC does and get them over here. So.
And could you add to that? I'm sorry, just add to that the list of P6s and P7s, P1s that you've.
Yeah. So Commissioner Mindyke had some contacts at the Department of Consumer Protections. So we were able to get email addresses for the licensed plumbers that have the P1 license, which is unlimited, the P7, which is more of the site work stuff, so water mains, storm drain connections, sewer connections. You also have your P2s that are allowed to do work with the P1s and P7s, and then also P6s. So we've emailed every active license in the city of Hartford, and we're looking to see who's looking for work. Or who's looking for contracting opportunities. So I actually had one gentleman that emailed me over the weekend, Terrence Anderson. I actually got him an interview at Bovair, and he's looking to possibly jump ship and work on our project. So,
And Bovair is?
Bovair Plumbing, they're a very great contractor who does a lot of our backwater valve work. So they're in Hartford right now. I think they have almost like 50 appointments in North Hartford, and they're looking to hire more people to keep up with their workload. So those are the kind of things we're doing, and we're looking to scale that and do more of it.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, and Mike, I think there's an urgency to try to find contractors and like you said, people with P1s or whatever license, so that they can actually do the work. But looking down the road and trying to say that internally, we're having trouble hiring people, with the skill levels that we need, even for an entry-level job. That's why I mentioned, like the tech schools and the community colleges. But in order to continue working, you can hire somebody without certifications and you can get them in a program. But in order to continue advancing their skills to a level where we could hire them and be relatively assured that they can do this job, there's actually 3 state agencies that you have to be involved with. So DCP issues the licenses. So it's Consumer Protection that actually issues plumbing and electrical and drain layer licenses and so forth.
Yep.
And then you have the Department of Labor, which manages the number of hours that you actually there as an apprentice. You have to put in 2,000 hours for one thing and 4,000 hours for another. And then Department of Education, which basically is the tech schools. They have a separate Board of Education for the tech schools, and and beyond that for the community colleges too. But I think if there's any way we can try to get these folks that are showing an interest to get them to those programs so that they can get those skills, because getting them in here and complying with the 30% is great. I think that we got to do that. There's an urgency for us to do that. But looking down the road, I think if we hear from our own human resources people that this is the area where we're having a difficulty hiring people with the skill levels that they need just to get started, maybe we could do more. That's all I'm trying to say, Scott.
Yeah.
And like I said, I think there are commissioners that have, kind of contacts and everything that can help with that as well. So if we could take a look at that and finding getting these folks into a program. If they're already working there, let's get them into a program to see if we can get them the license and stuff so they can get them.
Yeah, I think.
permanent job at the MDC.
I think there's been such a push in going to college that a lot of the times you find kids that go to college, they start getting an engineering job, and then they figure out they want to work in the field. So, I've talked to a couple inspectors at CDM Smith who had to let go of a couple people that wanted to work with their hands, right? So I think we are talking to the right people at the schools. We're talking to the NGOs like Ready CT, and I think we just need to develop a stronger network of everyone talking. So when they come across an individual that wants to do more hands-on work, they can point them in my direction, and I can point them in another direction to a contractor or bring them on board here. So I think that's important. And then also, attending the job fairs. We went to the Yard Goat Stadium 2 weeks ago. There was a job fair there. There was another one there today for veterans, and there's another job fair happening at St. Francis, right? So, just being out there, I think, more and meeting people and getting resumes and networking and trying to find people homes, I think can, bear some fruit.
Yeah, I would only add to this, and I'm sorry if it's for taking so long, is that I happen to know because my involvement in the program, that for instance, the car dealerships, in East Hartford and in Hartford, there are, I don't know, more than a dozen different car dealerships. And they would go to Cheney Tech where they had a great, automotive program and guarantee to hire the number one student every year. That person's got a job. The minute they graduate, they got a job, and then they take them and they send them to Mercedes training school or Audi training school or something. And they wind up with to start, they wind up with a $60,000 a year job. All they did was graduate from high school in a great program and, and have somebody be a partner with that school to say, we'll hire this person, maybe we need to do something like that.
I think that's our plan, is to have more of a presence in these tech schools and develop that partnership and start, look to do stuff.
Thank you, and I apologize if this.
I'll reach out to you too, since you have your connections at Prince Tech. You can help me out.
Great.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Along this same avenue, I guess I'll ask Scott or Jamie, do we have classifications, trainee classifications in more than a few different levels of skills that we can bring on these people? They could do their apprenticeship through us while working with one of our supervisors.
Yeah, so that actually, to piggyback on what Jeff was saying, a lot of what he's working on is, connecting the students with our contractors, but we're also working together, and I don't want that to get lost. We are working together, even engaging Tom Tyler, Dave Reddy, and some of our directors, Chris Levesque, already have a plan as to how can we utilize these technical students to train them about what the MDC does, and then ultimately be able to hire them when they graduate. So we are exploring doing some sort of co-op program like DOT is doing. We have had multiple conversations, but right now I think the urgency has been on connecting them with our contractors. And it just takes a little more time on the apprenticeship side, co-op side, but we are exploring. We were hoping to have someone here as early as, this fall. I think that was a little ambitious. So we're hoping maybe with the next semester in January, hopefully at that point, we'll be able to have more discussions, identify some students, and bring one or two students in to these key areas that have been identified to, again, provide the training, provide the exposure so that, again, when they're ready to graduate from these technical schools, hopefully we'll have a spot for them. That's the goal.
Do you think in the future we're going to, the board as a whole is going to see some proposals for new job specs for trainee positions?
Yes.
I mean, the state is at one time they were really good at this, and then they weren't. And now they're getting back to it. Right. But I mean, even for HR and personnel officer, they had trainee positions, and it worked out quite well.
Right.
Back to your with you and Rita, and it's nice to see affirmative action and human resources being able to actually even be in the same room together.
No problem there.
But when you have a goal candidate and you're going through the hiring process, and the promotional process is a different thing, but
yes,
and you find that you have not been able to fill that position with a goal candidate, how do you interact with affirmative action in terms of your justifications for your recommendation.
Sure. So really what we are looking at with every recruitment is to hire the best candidate. Yes, we have goals, and if all things are equal, we're going to lean towards that goal candidate. So we're just always having conversations, and ultimately the justification is based on the credentials that the person we're hiring has and how those are, better than the other candidates that were in that pool.
Okay. And you've got a whole set of forms to fill out and
Definitely.
pass on, and
Yes.
Rita, all these numbers are included in your affirmative action plan, which you've been really successful at getting approved in the first presentation. And I know that they do their due diligence in looking at these numbers. So I think that in and of itself, if you would agree or disagree, but supports the fact that HR's hiring process is working as best as it can.
Yes, and I think one of the critical factors in that success too is when there is a pending hire and decisions are being made and there are goal candidates, I work with HR to review the process to make sure that that the process is followed in such a way that all of the people are judged by the qualifications and the degree to which they meet all the qualifications and in terms of their skill level. So affirmative action does have a critical role in reviewing all hires and promotions before they're finalized. And I think that's important so that we have more than, we have a lot of eyes on the transactions themselves.
Okay, and I would just say to the committee that when Rita said affirmative action investigations are so different than a normal, whether it be security or typical investigation. At one point in my life, I was responsible for reviewing all affirmative action investigations for the Department of Correction, and they're extremely difficult. And if you've been having good success and employees are satisfied with your findings, then great to you.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I have a comment and a question. Bovair, they're plumbers. They do excellent work. They did work in my home. And the fact that you find some minorities, that's good because they were all Caucasian men in my home for about 2 months. Yeah. So that's impressive. Yes. If that's the way it is. I have a question now. When over the years or over months, when somebody apply for a position that is posted, whatever it is, and you wind up with, I don't know how many, you get down to 10 applicants or whatever. Let's say you end up with 10, but you only pick one. But you have 9 good resumes, good candidates with experience. And what do? Do you look back at any of those along the way to see if there's a fit for what we want to do right now?
Can I speak?
Yeah.
Speak to that? Or, I'm sorry. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I just want to say one thing, and it's really relates to what Rita said, and hopefully it answers part of your question. In addition to when I first got here, worked for the state for 19 years, I was told by the DAS, state of Connecticut, you had to hire the gold candidate. If it was a black male, you had to hire a black male. Rita told me, no, that's violation of the state law. You can't do that. You have to be inclusive. Your job, our job, is to make sure that the pool of candidates that we get to interview is broad as it can be. And we have to even justify to Rita, there's 9 white men on this list. Tell me why there's not any minorities. But I don't do that anymore. But to your question,
Yeah, my question is, you receive an app, there was a posting out there.
Yep.
And 500 people applied for it.
Yep.
You narrow it down to 50.
Yep.
Of the 50, you narrow it down to 20.
Yep.
Okay? You pick one. You have 19 good candidates that you could have chosen from, but there was something special about this one that do you at some point go back and take a look? where if you know, you're looking for somebody right now, do you go back and take a look at these resumes and say, you know, along the way there was a kid that was this, that's what I'm just trying to do. Do you
Yes.
just dump them or do you do go back and look at
No,
them?
there
That's
is
what I'm trying to
numerous,
find. I
there's
don't care what-
numerous
I'm not
situations
asking
where
what
we've
color.
interviewed somebody for one job and they weren't the right fit for that job. But we said, you know, HR, you might want to reach out to that individual and make sure that they apply for this other job. Happens all the time.
Yes, we all the time. It does happen where, you know, we have multiple strong candidates. Sometimes it's very challenging decisions to make. I think with the level of vacancies we have, sometimes we're lucky enough that, oh, we have another vacancy in that area. Instead of hiring one applicant, we might hire two. So then instead of getting just one of those good applicants, we can get two. Other situations are, again, if we know we interviewed someone for a job, we do need them to formally apply to the new posting because we do have union contracts to adhere to and we have to do the postings. They do have to formally apply, but on occasion we have picked up the phone to say, hey, we have this vacancy. Is this something that you're interested in?
Thank you.
I've got a couple of comments that I'd like to make. First of all, thank you for the hard data. That is, this is particularly important for people to have something to look at. I think that it's critical that you have numbers in front of you. And I do not take the tact or the line, basically, that you can't rely on numbers because that's what we rely on. They are what they are. I have several concerns. First of all, I'm concerned about the total population in this company in terms of the number of responsibilities that are going to be imposed upon us, whether or not we are appropriately staffed or manned. Do we have enough employees? And I think that that's something that we should really think about and look at. We have people here, but are we requiring folks basically, for example, to do a lot more than we really contemplated? I don't know, and I'm not suggesting that that is the case or not. But I think that this committee needs to take a look at that and to explore that. And at least in its own mind, be comfortable that we don't have people that are, for example, putting in a lot of overtime or what have you. I would, at least from my perspective, take the position that, once again, thanking you for this, but I would also like to discuss this with some of my fellow commissioners and see what their thinking is. One of the things that I find particularly alarming is that if you look at the Hispanic and Latino population, Hartford is over 50% Latino. You know, we're just not hitting the benchmarks there. And I know for a fact that if you know where to go and where to look, you can find folks. We're in competition for these folks, but you can find them. So once again, thank you for that. You know, I'm not looking to ambush anybody or anything like that, but I do think that we'd like to digest these numbers, and I would very much like to have a discussion once again with some of my fellow commissioners and get their views and inputs. So, Mr. Curry?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one more question, Jamie. Recently, I've had some conversations with officials of various bargaining units, not with MDC, but with municipalities and with the school systems. And they're finding, in some classifications, a lot of movement going elsewhere. And I also found out that they really don't know why, because they don't do exit polls. Do we do exit polls to determine if in fact we see, well, whether or not, but do we do exit polls to gather information that can help us down the road?
Yes, so we do exit surveys with anyone that leaves the district, not retirements, but generally with people who are leaving, resigning, or, making a decision on their own. So we do exit interviews there. We also, if we're seeing trends as to if people are leaving one specific area, we have also done some polls there if there's a concern, so.
Are we seeing any trends?
No, honestly, I mean, I think it's a tough labor market. I know I've said that before, and I hate to, beat a dead horse. A lot of our challenges are the same challenges that other employers are having. There's more competition. I think our benefits are great. I think our salaries are great. But I do think other organizations are catching up. I think, the work from home is a huge issue, at least on our business side of the house. So again, we're competing with some people. The labor force has changed. Priorities have changed. Work-life balance is important. It's just different generations, different. COVID changed a lot. So I do think the challenges we're seeing are in some ways a result of what has happened with COVID. And we're having the same challenges that everyone else is having.
Thank you.
If I may.
It used to,
Well, no, but
yeah, well, it used to be that people would work for contractors, either become an apprentice, get a license, and learn how to operate a big hoe, a big backhoe or something. And then they'd come to work for us because we had pensions and medical coverage and everything. But I do think that it's my understanding that we have lost some people to the private sector because they are willing to pay more. Maybe they don't have the pension plan, but if it's a labor, a union labor operation, they're getting, like, if it's one that's, paying scale wages, they not only get like, a $35 or $40 an hour job, running a backhoe, but they also get all the benefits and everything packaged up in a dollar amount that they get, or they get the benefits. So it is a difficult labor market, and I would agree, because I've been asking about this. And I think the favorite occupation of people coming out of school now is they want to design YouTube videos, because you can do it from home. And if you hit on one of them big, you can make enough money to retire. That's the story of so many people. But the chances of that are like the chances of becoming a Major League Baseball player. There's only 700 of them out of 350 million. So your chances of getting a job at the MDC and doing well here are much greater than in becoming a YouTube video designer and making a fortune in one shot. But I think we have to get that message out there. We got to somehow show that this is not only a great place to work, but that these careers are, can sustain somebody for their entire, working life, so.
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Just to answer a lot of questions that are going around, Commissioner Curry, you asked the question, do we have a training program? Do we have job specs? So as part of the union negotiation, we talked about this today, how do we deal with this kind of stuff? So one thing that we have been plagued with by union rules is we would hire someone into a position, and I'm going to take the entry-level engineering position. We would hire someone, and that someone's right out of school. The starting salary was, before we negotiated with the union, $92,000 a year, right out of school. In order to work here at the MDC, if you don't have your PE license, there's work for you when you're, in the first 5 years, but we're expecting you for succession planning to be the next possible director of engineering. Maybe not you're going to be that, but you have to be capable of getting to that point. So what did we do in union negotiations? We said, and the union agreed, we're going to lower the pay scale for the entry-level job. We're going to require you, before you walk in the door, to have your EIT license, which is a prerequisite. You can't take the PE test without the EIT test. So we would hire someone at $92,000. They don't get their EIT, they don't get their PE, and now we're looking for a place for them to work that doesn't require that license. We have and have not sent to PPI yet, but as part of the union negotiations, we really have two entry-level jobs by union. One is the FM1, which is a facility maintainer, does not require a CDL. We're required to alternate that job posting with the union. So one time is outside, the other time is inside. We have been very successful in hiring minorities in the last 5-6 months. We're going to be very successful in hiring more minorities in that position in the next month. But the CDL is required on the other position, and the federal government took away our ability to train our own people. We can no longer train our staff to get a CDL on site. They have to go to a licensed independent CDL school to get their CDL. So we have no control over that. But we have always had a POIT position in the water treatment side and the wastewater treatment side. Here's the problem. We post a position, we get somebody in there, they work for 2 years, they have the right under DPH rules to work for 2 years, they don't pass their test. Now we've invested all this money in an employee that can't pass the test. Our staff have gone through exhaustion trying to help our staff pass those tests. In circumstances they can't pass the test, there's nothing we can do, right? We don't want to terminate people because they can't pass the test. So what do we do to solve that? We said with the unions, let's create a new POIT position, which will come to PP&I for approval, which basically says you have to get so many credits for every 6 months. So education credits. Because we know in the wastewater and drinking water, there's 4 classes, class 1, 2, 3, 4. And in order to operate the plant, you have to have one person at the plant that's a class 4, and the majority of the operators are class 3. What did we do to the union? We said, you know what? Anyone who is, in order to get this deal done with the union negotiation, anyone who is a class 3, we're going to promote you tomorrow to the higher level. And in turn, what you're going to give us for that is you're going to allow us to mandate that if you come in at a POIT, you have to, just like the engineering student out of school, you're going to have to get 6 credits every 6 months, so that we know that if you need 30 credits to get your class 1, if you don't get 12 or 15 credits a year, you're never going to get the 30 credits. So they agreed to that. So to your point, yes, we're developing training programs, but there's responsibility that goes with it. And the unions bought off on it, and the new employee will have no choice. They'll have to comply. The other thing we talked about with the unions, which we didn't get there, was, is there a way to create a position that it doesn't require CDL, but again, we can't train them because the feds say you can't train your own CDL drivers. So again, we've got to work through, and we couldn't get there with the unions to figure out how do we bring in someone as a trainee for the UM position, which requires a CDL, and then what happens if that person doesn't get their CDL? Now, and this is why, in part, the reason why the MDC had 700 employees in 2006, because we had a lot of people who couldn't do their job, whether it was from discipline, whether it was from losing their CDL, and we had multiple people we were putting in places that because they couldn't do their job, so we had to hire somebody else to do their job. So that's in part the reason why MDC is able to do more with less, because we don't want to stagnate the organization, right? We don't want people to come into the organization, they can't get the next level of certification that they need. We want to promote them, we want to see them succeed, but if they can't, then we're left with someone in a position. The only solution is ask the board for more positions.
Well, and the only thing I would say to that, Scott, is what I've said to you before. Given our responsibility here at the MDC to protect public health and safety, we have to have well-trained people. We can't have somebody at the switch that doesn't know what they're doing. We just can't afford. You can't afford the liability of doing that. So I think that as long as we work at getting them the training, like Don was saying, getting them, helping them get through their apprenticeship and get their licenses and so forth. As long as we're doing that, I think that the relationship we have with our employees can be great. It's just finding somebody that wants to make that commitment, and I think we're going in the right direction with that. We just need to make every effort possible to try to find people who really want a job like that. So Thanks, Scott, and thanks, Jamie, for explaining this.
Thank you, Mr.
Add
Chairman.
one thing.
And Jamie, maybe you do it now, but I would encourage you, if you don't, that when we have a training positions, whether we have them now or we're going to create new ones, that from the time that that person is hired until they complete all their certifications, all their licensing, whatever that requirement is to get to that next level, that entire time, and maybe it needs to be negotiated with the bargaining units, but that entire time should be considered working test period.
And it is, and that's the
Okay.
conversations we've had. Yeah, that's the conversation
big
we've had.
difference.
And they're on board with it, until the
agreed to
point that someone can't get there, unfortunately. But hopefully, again, we want to set them up for success. And I think that's part of what we're working on now is we don't want to jump the gun and like have the cart before the horse at this point. We want to be thoughtful so that we can have a successful training program so that we don't have to end up in that situation in the end.
And for those that don't know, working test period, you can be dropped. You're not terminated, you're just dropped. And there's no issue. There's a grievance process that can be followed, but it's not a typical grievance process.
I just wanted to add, in looking at the workforce in terms of our level of utilization of different race, sex groups, you have to bear in mind, we don't look at population data, we look at occupational data in terms of what utilization level we're at. For example, the population, Hispanic population in Hartford could be a certain percentage, but if you look at actually people who are in skilled craft positions, it would be significantly less. So a U.S. Census came out in 2018, and there's a lot of references that go back to that census as we establish goals. Our goals are established based on occupational category, not population data.
And the disparity study
Excuse me.
identified that, right?
Excuse me. You have to know where to look because you can find those folks. That's all I'm saying. Nothing more, nothing less. And I'll end it there. Is there any more on this?
If I may just add, Commissioner, just to add to the discussion, even though we have these new requirements, and that's going to help us tremendously with the unions and fighting off issues associated with terminations because people cannot get their certifications at a certain time. There are circumstances, we've had individuals take their CDL test 5 times and fail. And MDC didn't just give up on that individual. We helped that individual get his CDL. We've had the same circumstance with water treatment operators. We spent multiple years trying to get someone to get their test. Our staff working weekends studying with that individual. So we don't take, it's 6 months and you're out, right? We have tried and we have history of trying to help our employees. It is so difficult, as we just said, to find individuals that can do this work and want to do this work. We're not looking to fire anyone. We're looking to build capacity within the organization. Thank you.
Can I add one more thing? I just want to make sure, I know we're talking a lot about diversity, and I don't want it to be lost that we are looking to think outside of the box. We're not just saying, oh, it's a tough labor market, too bad. We are thinking outside of the box. We are trying to find new ways where we can advertise. So this is like an ongoing process in HR, but we are actively engaged in trying to make improvements. They just unfortunately don't happen overnight, but we are actively working on that.
Item 7, consideration of Juneteenth. Look, this is as far as I'm concerned, is a discussion issue at this, because there are a lot of moving pieces that have to fall in place for this to take place, involving the unions and the board and labor negotiations. But I think it's a notion or an idea that should be brought forward so that at least we have a starting point. Looking at our vacation schedule, we currently have 13 total days of vacation. It says 14, but 2 of those are half days. Half day for Christmas, half day for New Year's. If we added it, and we would come to 14 if we decide to move forward on this. And if you look at the towns that currently celebrate Juneteenth, West Hartford is one, Bloomfield is one, Hartford. The state does. So, and I think it's an idea that merits consideration on the part of this institution. So, buddy?
Chairman, I think, and maybe Scott or Jamie knows the answer to this, but I think all the member towns have some form or another recognition of Juneteenth, if it's like a full holiday or what it is, but am I right about that? I think all 8 member towns have some sort of response.
Jamie provided that data.
Yep.
And we have
Sure.
brought, yes, we provided that data. We have brought this to PPI a couple of times. We were trying to get this as part of the negotiations, because the question is, if we add it, it's easy. We just add it, right? If we have to, if the board so choose to subtract something, then we would have to negotiate. We can't just do it, right? So that's why we're trying to get that during the negotiations. The staff supports whatever the board decides. If the board wants to add it to the existing holiday schedule, we're happy to do that. We just need to know, because it's a budgetary issue. We need to plan for that on anyone who's working a holiday gets paid time and a half. If it's a super holiday like Christmas or Thanksgiving, you get paid double time. So we have some issues we got to work out. Nothing that we can't overcome. It's about $20,000 roughly, Bob, that we think it would cost us.
Roughly.
If the people that we would expect to work on that day, we'd have to pay would be about 20 grand. It's not $1 million. It's not 100,000. It's 20, 25. It's not a big deal. So if the board so
Actually,
chooses.
the plant operators.
Yeah, so anyone who's working that would normally work, like our water treatment, wastewater treatment operators, the command center is 24/7. Anybody who would be working and have to work through that holiday because they have to work, we would have to pay time and a half. But it's not a lot of money. You know, it's 20 grand. So
We essentially had, just to kind of add this, but the East Hartford plant was on autopilot for, is it still on
They
autopilot?
still are.
Basically on
Yes.
autopilot, so.
Yeah,
The guys in Hartford are really running the East
Well,
Hartford.
they're manned during the day, but our satellite plants are not required. We got Deep to agree to that through SCADA and through controls, which is a major skilled craft that we're having problems with across the country and across the industry. But yes, those plants operate during the day with staff, but not at night. They run on their own and on the
On a
weekends.
holiday, they could essentially operate on autopilot.
Right. But it's not a lot of money is the point. If we were to institute it, we're happy to do that.
Shouldn't it be discussed near budget time?
And we're here, right? We're here. So it's not a lot of money, but the bigger problem is if the board so chose to reduce a holiday, we can't just do that. We need
I don't mean budget time. I meant union negotiation.
that's over, right?
It's over.
It's over. So we could, we could have included that as part of the negotiations, but we didn't. So the answer is if the board, PPI and the board so chose to say, let's add it, but subtract something, we would have to go back to the unions and negotiate that agreement. They have to vote and say yes, right? We can't just do it.
And you don't have to
We
do that,
added it.
you don't have to do
don't
that
have
during contract negotiations.
Right, you could do it now.
You should negotiate any time with the
Right.
unions.
But we were trying to do that during negotiations.
Mr. Curry?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would suggest that the committee not make a recommendation other than to just refer it to the district board for consideration. And I would make that in a motion if it would be accepted.
Have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Good.
And I will just add to that I have, and we did get a chance to speak to Scott about this, and Bob came up with that number. So in the budget, we're talking about $20,000. It's, I don't make it sound like it's totally insignificant. As Don said, every dollar counts. But it's, in the it's essentially decimal dust in a $300 million, it's way out in the third or fourth decimal point. So I think that in our negotiations, but if the district board so chooses to add this, I think the $20,000 is going to be pretty easy to appropriate. I don't think we're going to need to fight over it. So
Travelers.
You know, so.
There you go.
Okay. Item 8, if no one has any objection, I would, at this point, suggest that we move this to some other point in time.
The meeting?
The maternity leave, because I think I need to talk to Jamie so that basically she's prepared. All right? Are there any objections?
I didn't understand that. What?
Item 8, I'm going to suggest that that item be moved, that we not discuss it tonight,
The next meeting?
to the next meeting.
Thank you.
Is there any disagreement? So we move to item 9, opportunity for general public comments.
Judy Allen, West Hartford. This may be relevant or not, but when I graduated from college, I had a degree in sociology, which equipped me to do absolutely nothing. And there was a program it was a government-funded program called the Community Education and Training Act, something like that. And basically, the federal government paid my salary at a company for a year with the understanding that I'd be trained in, and they'd be willing to hire me at the end of that. So maybe you can go for a government grant to train people. I am hopeful that Commissioner Taylor has made comments about knowing about places that there are people that could be hired, that he is sharing that with staff so they can follow up on those leads for people. And I am concerned about a statement about wanting to talk to commissioners about certain issues, which sounded to me like I want to talk behind closed doors with other commissioners. It didn't sound like a very public discussion. And I think that publicly that has been a perception for a long time, that a lot of things get talked about behind closed doors and not in public. Thank you.
Opportunity for general public comments again. Item 10, commissioner requests for future agenda items. Mr. Payne.
Yeah, I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank Rita Kelly and Jamie Harlow and the entire staff. They really are an amazing group of employees, and I just wanted to thank them for all their hard work. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. You're welcome. Any other commissioner requests for future agenda items? There being none, I will entertain the appropriate motion.
So moved.
Second.